No one expected it. At precisely 5:00 in the afternoon on August 21, flames erupted from the bow of the USS New Orleans, a massive amphibious transport dock of the United States Navy, moored quietly at White Beach in Okinawa. Thick black smoke curled into the sky, painting a grim silhouette against the Pacific horizon. In an instant, a vessel built to project power and deliver Marines ashore became a battlefield against an unseen enemy fire itself. Television cameras caught the shocking scene. Alarms blaring, sailors rushing across the deck, while nearby ships maneuvered into position to blast seawater over the inferno. Questions surged. Was this a tragic accident, or something far darker? A test of American resolve inside the very heart of the Western Pacific. What secret vulnerability was just revealed, and could this single blaze alter the balance of power across the Pacific? Your voice matters. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and stand with us. The fire aboard USS New Orleans was more than a sudden blaze. It was a test of discipline, technology, and alliance trust. At 5:15 in the afternoon, sailors formed emergency teams, sealing hatches and cutting oxygen flow to stop the inferno from spreading below deck. Japanese Coast Guard vessels raced into position, their water cannons pounding the ship's flank, while American helicopters circled overhead. This was no ordinary incident. The vessel carries Marines, helicopters, and landing craft, critical assets for any Pacific crisis. To lose her, even temporarily, would ripple across America's forward presence in Asia. And here lies the haunting question. Was this fate, failure, or sabotage? Stay with us. Comment your thoughts, accident, or something more? The moment smoke billowed skyward from the USS New Orleans, the chain of command shifted instantly into battle rhythm. Fire, on any warship, is as deadly as a missile strike. It devours oxygen, sears wiring, cripples electronics, and transforms steel into a furnace. By 5:20 in the afternoon, the amphibious transport dock was already listing slightly, as pumps struggled to keep pace with the torrents of water pouring onto her deck. Inside the hull, sailors wore firefighting suits, advancing into darkened corridors filled with choking fumes. Every compartment sealed could mean life or death for hundreds of men and women aboard. Every wrong move could mean losing the ship. The USS New Orleans is not just a vessel. She is a San Antonio-class amphibious transport dock, a floating fortress nearly 700 feet long, designed to deliver Marines and their armored vehicles onto hostile shores. Her radar arrays can track multiple threats. Her defensive armament 30mm Bushmaster cannons and RIM 116 rolling airframe missiles exist to repel sudden air or missile attacks. Yet here she was, vulnerable to an ancient enemy. Fire. The blaze began near the forward bow. Was it a fuel leak, a shorted power line, or could it have been planted? That question, unspoken but undeniable, rippled across command briefings as the incident unfolded. At 5:30 in the afternoon, the 7th Fleet in Yokosuka received its first full report. Rear Admiral Matthew Carroll, commander of amphibious forces in the Pacific, immediately ordered nearby vessels to reposition. The USS Green Bay, another San Antonio-class ship, maneuvered alongside, her pumps blasting water in long arcs. Japanese Coast Guard patrol ship Ryukyu raced into the scene, her crew working shoulder to shoulder with Americans. This was no longer just an emergency, it was a demonstration of alliance, unity under pressure. But the danger was escalating. By 5:40, temperatures in compartments beneath the main deck rose above 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Ammunition lockers had to be cooled with streams of seawater. Flight deck fuel stores, usually sealed with reinforced hatches, were tested to their limits. The haunting memory of the USS Bonhomme Richard fire in San Diego in 2020 loomed large. That blaze had raged for 4 days, consumed the ship, and ultimately led to her decommissioning. Could history be repeating itself this time, not on American soil, but at the forward edge of the Pacific, within sight of Japan's islands? What would it mean if America's Pacific amphibious power was crippled overnight? The USS New Orleans is more than hardware. She represents presence. She represents credibility. For every exercise with Japan's self-defense forces, for every reassurance to Taiwan, for every silent message sent to Beijing or Pyongyang, amphibious ships like New Orleans are the steel backbone. Losing her even temporarily signals vulnerability, and vulnerability is a signal adversaries do not ignore. At 6:00 in the evening, New Hampshire K television broadcast live footage of the fire, watched by millions. Japanese citizens saw their allies' warship in distress, smoke billowing into the Okinawan sky. Across the East China Sea, In command posts in Shanghai and Pyongyang, analysts no doubt watched the same footage, asking themselves, was this luck or was this opportunity? Within the Pentagon, messages flew rapidly. Was this a mechanical failure, troubling but containable? Or was this an act of sabotage, perhaps carried out by an insider or by cyber interference in shipboard systems? Already, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service had been notified. Already, the intelligence community began combing chatter for signs of claims, threats, or hints that this fire was no accident. And as America watched its own vessel burn in Allied waters, the unspoken truth hung in the air. In a contested region, perception is as powerful as reality. Let us ask ourselves, what would adversaries conclude from this? Would they see resilience, as sailors and allies fought the blaze side by side? Or weakness, in the sight of a ship disabled without a single enemy shot fired? The technical details are as compelling as the symbolism. The New Orleans carries nearly 700 Marines, their vehicles, and landing craft. She can deploy tilt-rotor MV-22 Ospreys, helicopters, and even amphibious armored vehicles straight from her well deck. She is the very embodiment of expeditionary assault. To imagine her incapacitated is to imagine an entire wing of America's Pacific playbook erased in an instant. By 6:30 in the evening, firefighters had cut the blaze into sectors. Some compartments were declared contained, others were still raging. Helicopters hovered, dropping infrared sensors to track heat signatures, guiding sailors to the hottest points. This was no drill. It was war against time, and in the background, another war was being fought. The battle of narrative. Japanese media emphasized alliance cooperation. American outlets drew parallels to the Bonhomme Richard. Chinese state-run media whispered questions about American declining readiness. And in the living rooms of Okinawa, Japanese citizens wondered if the American fleet that protects them could even protect itself. Is it fair to ask, how does a superpower maintain credibility when its most advanced ships burn at their own piers? Every sailor fighting the flames knew the answer lay not in words but in action. To save the USS New Orleans would be to preserve more than steel. It would preserve the symbol of presence, readiness, and deterrence. It would signal to allies that America does not falter under pressure. By 7 o'clock in the evening, the fire was still not fully contained. Engineers began planning for worst-case scenarios, flooding compartments deliberately to starve the fire at the risk of damaging critical systems. Salvage tugs moved into position. A decision loomed: save her at all costs, or risk losing her entirely in the attempt. And here we must ask, at what point does a rescue mission cross into sacrifice? Would you risk the ship's electronics, her propulsion, even her combat readiness simply to keep her afloat? The answer, for the United States Navy, was yes. For in this single vessel, in this single hour, the credibility of American amphibious power in the Pacific was at stake. And so, the battle raged on not against enemy missiles, but against fire and time. Accident, sabotage, or something darker? Drop your view in the comments, and subscribe. This fire's untold truth is only starting to emerge. By 7:30 in the evening, the situation aboard USS New Orleans remained critical. The fire had raged for more than 2 hours, stubbornly clinging to compartments deep within the ship's forward section. For the crew, exhaustion was not an option. Every sailor understood that in naval doctrine, fire is treated as a hostile force. It is fought with the same ferocity as an enemy boarding party or missile strike. The chain of command now faced multiple challenges at once. The first was survival, keeping the fire from spreading into the engine rooms. If the blaze penetrated those compartments, propulsion would be lost, and the vessel might never sail again. The second was containment, ensuring that flight deck, fuel, weapon stores, and electronic systems remained shielded. The third was symbolism. The world was watching, and the 7th Fleet's reputation rested on the image of sailors and Japanese allies fighting side by side. At 7:45 in the evening, temperatures dropped slightly in the bow, signaling that containment efforts were working, yet hotspots remained. Fire teams advanced into compartments, sometimes crawling, sometimes dragging hoses while kneeling on deck so hot that boots softened under their weight. The Japanese Coast Guard continued hammering the ship with water streams from 2 patrol vessels. NHK cameras caught the extraordinary sight. Japanese firefighters and American sailors exchanging signals across the water, synchronizing their attacks as if they were one unified navy. This image, desperation and unity, was broadcast not just across Japan but across the globe. But beneath the public narrative lay a harsher truth. Every minute spent battling flames eroded readiness. Electrical circuits fried by heat would take months to replace. Hull plates warped by fire might require dry docking. If USS New Orleans had to be pulled from the Pacific theater, it would not simply be a maintenance setback, it would be a strategic gap. The United States maintains only a handful of these amphibious platforms in the region. Losing one could tilt calculations in Beijing or Pyongyang. And so, the whispers began. Was this truly an accident? Reports filtered through that shipboard alarms, triggered twice earlier that afternoon, before the major fire erupted. Did crews ignore them, believing them to be false positives? Or were they part of a sabotage effort, meant to mask a deliberate ignition? Naval investigators would spend months piecing the truth together. But in the tense hours after 7 o'clock, none of that mattered to the sailors sweating in their firefighting gear. By 8:15 in the evening, a new threat emerged. Smoke spread into living quarters, forcing evacuation of more than 200 sailors into the open air of the flight deck. Helicopters evacuated several with smoke inhalation to a nearby base hospital. Though casualties remained officially none, the psychological toll was immense. Imagine standing aboard one of the most advanced warships in the Pacific, watching it burn beneath your boots. Would you still feel invincible? And yet, morale did not crack. Officers barked orders, sailors rallied, and Japanese fire crews continued their relentless assault against the blaze. The political ripples, meanwhile, spread far faster than the flames. In Washington, Pentagon officials briefed congressional leaders, reassuring them that the fire was under control. But privately, questions mounted. Were American warships overstretched? Was maintenance lagging? Had lessons from the catastrophic Bonhomme-Richard fire truly been learned? Across the Pacific, Chinese analysts pored over live broadcasts. They noted how quickly Japanese and American forces coordinated, but also how fragile even a modern vessel could appear under stress. State-run outlets in Beijing framed the fire as evidence of aging U.S. power projection. Is this how perception wars are won, not by firing missiles but by allowing an ally's ship to burn on live television? The answer depends on what comes next. At 8:30 in the evening, a breakthrough occurred. Thermal imaging showed the hottest zones cooling rapidly. Fire teams reported progress. Within another 30 minutes, flames that once seemed unquenchable were reduced to glowing embers. At 9 o'clock, the captain announced partial containment. Cheers erupted on the flight deck, but quietly, for everyone knew the battle was not yet over. The symbolism of that moment cannot be overstated. Here was proof that alliance, training, and relentless willpower could overcome even disaster. The USS New Orleans, though scarred and battered, remained afloat. She had not surrendered to fire, neither had the United States Navy. But what did this episode reveal to the world? First, it highlighted the razor's edge on which America's Pacific presence balances. One ship, just one, crippled at port, and already analysts were recalculating readiness. Second, it reminded adversaries that American resolve is not measured by invulnerability, but by recovery. The fire did not sink her. It did not kill her crew. Instead, it showcased resilience. Third, it exposed the fragility of deterrence. If perception is power, then every mishap becomes a message. And here lies the question we must ask ourselves. Should America's allies feel reassured by the sight of unity and resolve, or worried by the vulnerability revealed? In Okinawa that night, as smoke slowly cleared into the humid Pacific air, one fact was undeniable. A ship designed for war had survived her own inferno, but the shadow remained. For every headline proclaiming victory over the blaze, another whispered the doubt, was this an accident or a warning? Does this incident prove U.S. Navy resilience or expose dangerous weakness? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe, because the deeper analysis is only beginning. At 9:30 that evening, just as exhaustion gave way to relief, a quiet but disturbing discovery shifted the entire tone of the operation. Fire teams advancing into the forward compartments found something unusual. Electrical panels in the bow section showed signs not of random shorting, but of deliberate tampering. Wires had been stripped, protective seals disturbed, and a suspicious scorch pattern suggested ignition may not have been accidental. The finding was rushed to the captain, then relayed immediately to the 7th Fleet Command. Within 30 minutes, a hush fell over the command deck. The incident was no longer classified as fire of unknown origin. It was now under investigation as possible sabotage. Could it be true? A United States Navy warship, moored in Allied waters, had been compromised from within? The implications were staggering. At 10 o'clock that evening, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents based in Yokosuka were already en route to Okinawa. Intelligence officers began scouring communication intercepts for chatter. Japanese authorities, alarmed, increased security around White Beach Port. The atmosphere shifted from one of relief to one of suspicion. Let us pause to consider what this means. If the blaze aboard USS New Orleans was deliberate, then the United States Navy was not simply fighting fire, it was fending off an attack. Not from missiles, not from drones, but from infiltration and sabotage. Such an act would represent not only a breach of physical security, but a psychological strike against America's forward presence in Asia. And ask yourself, which adversary benefits most from this? Would Beijing gain by demonstrating that American forces in Okinawa are vulnerable inside their own port? Would Pyongyang, notorious for asymmetric tricks, dare to test Washington in such a subtle but shocking way? Or could it even be a lone insider, disillusioned and reckless, acting without foreign guidance? By 10:15 in the evening, speculation already swirled within the Pentagon. Some analysts believe the fire was linked to cyber warfare. Modern ships are loaded with sensors, pumps, and fire suppression systems, all reliant on digital networks. If an intruder manipulated those systems, could they have delayed detection or even sparked the blaze remotely? Others insisted the evidence pointed to manual tampering. But either way, the conclusion was terrifying. Someone knew where to strike. And when. At 10:30, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida received a secure call from Washington. The message was blunt. The incident aboard USS New Orleans could no longer be treated as routine. Security in Okinawa was elevated to its highest peacetime level. Civilian port workers were screened, patrols doubled. The alliance was being tested not by open confrontation, but by shadow warfare. And here lies the twist. The blaze that millions watched on television was not just fire. It may have been the first shot in a new kind of confrontation. Consider the strategic consequences. If sabotage is confirmed, the United States will be forced to re-examine every ship, every base, every routine in the Pacific theater. Training will intensify, security will tighten, and suspicion may rise even between allies. Yet to do nothing would be worse. To accept sabotage as accident would invite more attacks. At 11 o'clock, the fire was declared under control. But while sailors collapsed from exhaustion, intelligence officers ramped into overdrive. Intercepts from North Korea were flagged for unusual activity. Chinese state media suddenly reduced coverage of the fire, as if instructed to mute the story. Meanwhile, anonymous online accounts pushed narratives suggesting American incompetence caused the blaze. Was this coincidence or coordinated disinformation? The twist grew sharper by midnight. Engineers conducting initial inspections found scorch marks inconsistent with simple fuel ignition. Instead, accelerants may have been involved. If so, the fire was not only sabotage, it was a message. And what message was that? Perhaps it was a warning that even America's most powerful ships can be humbled without a single missile fired. Perhaps it was a test, probing how the United States and Japan would react under sudden stress. Or perhaps it was bait, an attempt to lure Washington into overreacting, revealing its hand before a larger confrontation. Here we must ask, should America respond loudly, risking escalation, or silently, hunting the truth in the shadows? The debate inside Washington grew fierce. Some argued for a strong public stance to reassure allies and deter adversaries. Others insisted silence was wiser to avoid giving away just how seriously the sabotage was being taken. What would you decide? Show strength openly or guard secrets until the investigation is complete? The sailors aboard USS New Orleans knew nothing of these debates. For them, the night ended in exhaustion and ash. Yet unknowingly, they had become the centerpiece of a larger contest, one fought not just with weapons, but with perception, deception, and narrative. By sunrise on August 22nd, the Pacific balance of power felt different. One ship had burned, but the fire lit up questions no one could ignore. Is this sabotage, cyber attack, or tragic failure? Comment below, and if you believe the truth behind such incidents must be revealed, subscribe because this untold story has only begun to twist. By dawn on August 22nd, the USS New Orleans still smoldered, her decks blackened but her hull intact. Yet the fire's aftermath extended far beyond steel. In Washington, analysts dissected the event like a battle report. In Tokyo, policymakers weighed how Japanese citizens perceived the alliance. In Beijing and Pyongyang, intelligence officers scribbled notes, asking themselves how one blaze might reshape deterrence. Strategically, three consequences were immediate. First, credibility. The United States Navy prides itself on projecting order across the Pacific. A damaged ship, whether by accident or sabotage, offers adversaries a narrative weapon. For days, Chinese and North Korean media amplified the image of an American vessel crippled without combat. Even without firing a shot, adversaries could claim psychological victory. Second, vulnerability. Amphibious transport docks are irreplaceable assets. Losing one, even temporarily, reduces the 7th Fleet's rapid response options. Joint drills with Japan, amphibious exercises with the Philippines, deterrence missions near Taiwan all could be constrained. America can replace a damaged hull with time and money, but time in the Pacific is the one commodity adversaries hope to exploit. Third, resilience. And here lies the paradox. For while adversaries may trumpet American weakness, the response revealed strength. Japanese Coast Guard units and United States sailors fought together with seamless coordination. Commanders made bold decisions to flood compartments and save the vessel. In the end, the USS New Orleans survived because of training, discipline, and alliance unity. That resilience sends its own message. Sabotage may strike, but it cannot break the alliance. The strategic lesson is sobering. 21st century warfare does not always begin with missiles screaming through the sky. It may begin with a spark, a system glitch, or a hidden hand turning a wrench. The real question is not whether accidents happen, they always will, but how a superpower responds. Did the fire weaken America's image in the Pacific, or prove that even in crisis, U.S. forces endure? The image of the USS New Orleans burning in Okinawa will linger far longer than the smoke that curled into the Pacific sky. For sailors aboard her, the fire was a crucible of discipline, courage, and unity. For America's allies, it was a reminder that even the most advanced fleets are not invincible. And for adversaries, it was a fleeting glimpse of weakness. One they will surely attempt to exploit. But history tells a deeper truth. The strength of a superpower is not measured by the absence of crisis, but by the response to it. The United States Navy has weathered storms before, from Pearl Harbor's devastation to the Bonhomme Richard's destruction. Each time, the lesson has been the same. Steel can be rebuilt, systems can be repaired, but resilience and alliance endure. That is the hidden story here. While flames threatened to consume the USS New Orleans, American sailors and Japanese partners fought together united, not just in saving a ship, but in protecting the credibility of a security order that spans oceans. The consequences ripple outward. Billions may be spent on repairs, schedules for exercises may be delayed, adversaries may attempt propaganda victories. Yet none of that changes the fundamental reality. Strength deters chaos. Power, combined with discipline and partnership, prevents escalation into open war. And here lies the lesson for us all. Peace is not preserved by chance. It is preserved by preparation, sacrifice, and vigilance. The fire aboard USS New Orleans is a warning that complacency invites risk, and that the thin line between deterrence and disaster can ignite in a single spark. But it is also a reassurance. Even in crisis, America's alliances hold. So I ask you, how should the United States respond to incidents like this? Loudly, with public deterrence, or quietly, with patient investigation? Comment your thoughts below. Debate fuels understanding, and your perspective matters. This is not merely a naval story. It is a lesson in sovereignty, in the cost of readiness, and in the reality that power must be maintained, not assumed. Is strength deters chaos? Peace demands power. Subscribe now, and join a community that refuses to look away. History is being written in real time, and your voice, your awareness, is part of the mission to uncover truth and defend order. Stand with us.